Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of Impactful Conversations. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have with me as a guest Ryan Rickelton, who I'll introduce to you in just a moment. But thank you so much once again for tuning in to Impactful Conversations. Just a reminder, if this isn't your first time listening to one of our podcasts, that you can catch more of our episodes either on our YouTube channel, our Apple podcast, our Spotify podcast, and our Google podcast as well. You just go to either of those and you just search Impactful Conversations. And we also have a website that you can check out, which is impactfulconversations.co.za. And yeah, super thrilled, like I said, to get back, down to business, to be joined by Ryan Rickelton. He is a professional cricketer who plays for the Imperial Lions and the Jozi Stars. And he's also recently been called up to the Proteas T20 squad. And he's a wonderful batsman, a wonderful human, and a wonderful person altogether. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing this morning?
Morning, Tuff. Thank you so much for obviously having me on your Impactful Conversations podcast. Looking forward to it. Been a busy start to the morning, but like I said, here we are, and looking forward to our conversation.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I'm thrilled to chat to you, Ryan. It's you're someone who I've known for almost 11 years now, actually, and thrilled to actually be having this discussion. So I'm quite keen to get stuck into it, and I think so. Obviously, I know you quite well, and I probably know the answer to the question that I'm about to ask you. You and I have a more unique relationship is that you and I were born on the same day, actually, same day, same year. I do know you fairly well. So just for those who don't know you though, just briefly, tell us a little bit about, where you were born, where you grew up. So where were you born and where did you grow up, in South Africa or the world and so on?
Yeah, so pretty much a South African, Joburg, my whole life. I was born here just down the road at Sandton Clinic, 96, obviously, same date and time as you, I guess. I lived here my whole life. Went to school at Crawford when I was young, Crawford Sandton when I was very, very young, and then was fortunate enough to go to St. Stithians when I think I was grade 1 or 2. And then I lived at Saints for the majority of those years, as my dad was a teacher there, and that kind of taken me to where I am today.
Yeah, awesome. And that's, obviously where you and I met. Right, I'm curious, just another sort of introductory question is, who are your cricketing role models, if you had to, list one or two?
I think it's changed over the years. When I was younger, I used to really enjoy the old Australian guard, Ricky Pontings and Mike Hussies. But as it's changed recently to probably players I play with, guys like Rassie van der Dussen, Reza Hendricks, Dominic Hendricks, guys that are more, I relate to them a lot more than I do, obviously, the big superstars in the world. Obviously, they're still the guys you want to be like, but the guys that I play with are probably more of my role models and guys that I enjoy a lot more now.
Awesome. And so if we had to dive into the cricketing journey, right, as a whole, I'm quite keen to get your take on this, and I'm sure anybody listening is probably quite keen to get stuck into this. I want to know from you, what inspired you to start playing cricket? Where did that start for you? And I guess another question is, when it started, were you always, I know you're a wicketkeeper batsman, but were you always that at the beginning, or, did it start in another way?
To be honest, it probably started more with my dad than anything. I love being outside. Never had a phone or any of those things that people have today. Like I said, we were lucky enough to live at Saints, and that is one big playground when you're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. It still is even when you're 18 years old. So it kind of started there. I'd always nag my dad, take me down. I used to love rugby a hell of a lot with him, and cricket also, I really got engaged with it. My dad was an old cricketer as well, played for Transvaal. So we either played rugby or cricket, and then squash came along as well. So it really came from my parents down the line. And yeah, like I said, I admired my dad. I really liked cricket. I liked hitting things, bat and ball kind of sports. Squash and cricket really took to me. And like I said, from Saints, so lucky enough to spend a hell of a lot of time in the nets there. I mean, I used to wake my dad up at 6 o'clock, and we going to the nets before school, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with the game. Wicket keeping almost probably started when I was in the prep school. I only did it because no one else actually wanted to do it, and I quite enjoyed it as well. And I guess me, my love for sports and outside and doing things kind of keeps me going. So it wasn't just cricket from the younger age. Like I said, it was squash, running, tennis, everything I could actually get my hands on. And I think it just over time it grew into something I actually got. I was getting a lot better very quickly, and it was probably my most enjoyable sport. And it just obviously has grown with me from probably 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah. So I mean that's incredibly interesting, right? And I'm quite curious, so as you've obviously grown up, so this started off as something that you did, from quite a young age, as you say. But when did the cricketing dream become serious? So when did you decide that actually this thing, I'm actually quite good at this thing, and I probably want to do this thing, quite seriously. When did that decision take place?
It probably started from a young age. Like I said, I was very competitive, and I was training. I was doing a lot of stuff, and I was getting better all the time. Probably first came a bit of a reality when I made the Gauteng under 13 side. We had a good side, and I think once I got into there, I said, okay, well, at least it looks like I can potentially get somewhere in this game. Obviously, you're still 13, you don't really know what's happening. But it just kind of made me want to get better and better. So from the under 13 side, I wanted to make the 15s the next year, and then the 17s and the 19s. I think probably under 15, we played the interprovincial tournament, and I ended up with the most runs there. And I was a player of the tournament there. And I think kind of from there, I settled into saying, okay, well, I think I might have what it takes to be good enough. And like I said, I have the facilities, the opportunity to get better at it every single day. And I kind of took it from there. Like I say, obviously you don't realize until you think you're good enough, but you kind of have to prove it to yourself. And even when I got into the Lions setup, you still get a little bit jittery, but I think until you can work out and prove to yourself that you are good enough, and that probably happened from when I was 15, and a constant reminder even when I was 19 or 18 and I got into the team that you are good enough. And I'm probably sitting in the same boat again now with the South African side. Am I good enough to play? It's the same questions being asked. So it's to the point where you kind of have to do it to remind yourself that you are. But I like to think that knowing myself and knowing my game, that now I am good enough to go far in it. And obviously want to pursue that and see where it takes me.
Yeah. And if you had to, I mean, has there been a defining moment for you as a cricketer? Maybe a knock that you made, or an innings that you had that has sort of defined you as a cricketer, in the past?
I could pinpoint many, but probably the best one I could say is probably when I was 19 or 18 at 18 in matric. We had our IPT, and our Coke Week tournament was in Pretoria, and I dislocated my knee going into that, so I was on the back of no training, and I was just racing to be fit on time, because I didn't really have a hell of a lot behind me going into it. There wasn't a lot of work done to go into that weekend. I ended up probably batting the best I've ever batted in my collective 19 years as a person at that stage, and everything just kind of clicked for me. And it happened, I think, and it always boils down to what sits in your head, and I can put it down to probably the fact that because I hadn't done a hell of a lot of work, obviously cricket-wise, because I was injured, there was less expectation on myself from myself. There was less pressure on me as a person from that. I wasn't putting a hell of a lot on me I was just happy to be playing again. And I think that was probably the moment where I was like, okay. And like I said, I played really well. And it was kind of the point where, I was really chuffed, and it was probably the moment where I thought, okay, we can move forward with this.
And if we sort of reflect on your, still short career, as a cricketer, what are, 2 or 3 lessons or key lessons that you've learned on the field?
There's been a hell of a lot of things I've learned on the field. It's a continuous learning game, cricket. You haven't seen it all. You never will see it all. But there's so many things that comes down to it. Everyone wants to be the best. Everyone wants it now. A massive thing I learned in cricket is patience. You have to be patient, and I think it all boils down to what sits in between your ears at the end of the day. I think obviously, hard work, your discipline, your sacrifice is, I think, natural in any industry if you want to make it to the top. But it boils down to obviously patience and how you think about the game. Personally, for me, how you think about the game, how you train, it becomes quite specific. And how you relate to yourself in a way. You have to be your best friend at the same time, because personally, I'm probably my worst enemy at the same time as well. So it's a constant struggle between one or the other. Probably patience is the most key discipline. You obviously need to just trust your process, what you have out, and you just got to keep plugging away. And yes, that comes down to patience, and just keep doing the same thing day in and day out until it clicks, I guess. Yeah,
that's incredibly powerful, Ryan. And thank you for sharing that. I think that is quite profound. We started off, fairly quite deep and fairly quickly. so let me bring our heart rates down a little bit, and bring our blood pressure down a little bit. So just to walk me through, what's a typical day in the life of a professional cricketer? And I guess I'll contextualize this question, to say with when it's cricket season, particularly. And I guess I'd also be curious to know when it's off season as well. What's a typical day in your life?
Well, right now we just finished our season. As for example, last week during game days, we play a lot of 4-day games, so we're up early. I probably get to the ground just before or just after 7:30 around there, and we play the whole games. We leave at about 7 after the day's play. Obviously review the day. So that's kind of how a day in a match situation would go. Weeks where we're training is a bit different. Like I said, I'm quite an active guy, so I get up early. I like running, so I'll go for a run most mornings. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, I'll go for a run. And then we go to practice from about 10 till about 1 o'clock. And that's just more obviously skill-based, team-based. It all obviously reflects on what you're looking to do. And we'll finish about 1 o'clock with our fielding, all of our cricket specifics. Now I'll come home. Like I said, I'm a busy guy, so I'll probably go to gym as well after that. And and then obviously personal hobbies come into it. What other guys like to do. Like I said, I'm busy. I'll read a bit. I'll run. I'll play a bit of golf in the afternoon if there's time. So obviously then that's, like I say, you finish the day at around 1 o'clock, and everyone has their own personal things they want to do. Off season's a bit different for us. It's a bit difficult in terms of, so now we're off for probably about 3 months now, 3-4 months now. So it gets quite long. So what a lot of guys do is that we get the opportunity to go to England and play as overseas pros in either club teams or county teams. So you get the opportunity to go live in England, whatever county or city is interested in you. And usually go over probably now, end of March, beginning of April, and you come back end of August. Sometime in August, and you obviously go be the overseas pro for them. And as soon as you get back into South Africa, it's straight back into training. So it all depends on the players. A lot of players don't like going to England. A lot of players do like going to England. I love it. this year is obviously a bit tricky with COVID and the quarantine, and a lot of companies in England are struggling financially as well. So it impacts a lot of players. But for me personally, this winter, I'll take probably a couple of weeks off now, give myself a bit of a break. And then actually, I'm interested in doing some more internships. Like I said, I have a degree. I want to kind of extend that road for potential life after cricket, or definite life after cricket. And I'll go out there and try learn a few things.
Yeah, that sounds quite interesting. It sounds like it's going to be a very interesting winter up ahead for you. So something which I remember in my brief time as a cricketer, I call myself more of like a part-timist, really.
Yeah.
More like a part-timist, really. I mostly played cricket because I was off-season for rugby at the time. So
yeah,
well, this is a good way to keep fit, But there's something which we used to do, which is the bleep test. And for anybody listening, it was a fitness test where basically, you would start off. I think you'd have to run. I think it's like 22 meters or so, and you have to get to the other side. Before the beep goes off, and then every sort of minute or two, the time between the beeps gets shorter, and then you eventually go up a couple levels. I'm curious, do you guys still do that? Like, is it still a thing?
It's changed. The beep test was a pointless thing, I think, as any athlete. It still is in my eyes. We do a bit more specifics now. It went away from the beep test to repeat sprints. Literally shuttles. It's probably about a 250 meter shuttle in 45 seconds, and then 30 seconds off 10 times. So it's gone away from that as well, and now we do the yo-yo, which is similar to the beep test, but it's similar to the beep test. You climb levels, it gets quicker, same distance, but in between, I think you have you have X amount of seconds to get there and back, and then you get 10 seconds off. And you get there and back, and you get 10 seconds off. So they said that's more cricket specific because you use short bursts of energies, or I don't know. I don't know. I don't find them overly difficult, these tests, but they're quite frustrating to do because come testing day, obviously, you have to beat what you've done the year before, and at the end of the day, it's a hell of a lot of running, a lot of weights and specifics, and it can get a bit frustrating.
I remember those days. Especially. I think there's so many tests, and we also had, I think, in rugby, you had the Cooper's test.
Yes, I remember that. It was also horrible.
How far could you run in 12 minutes? I remember that. Yeah, it was sure.
That was hard.
That was quite difficult. Hey, like I think at the beginning, when I heard about it, I was like, well, this can't be too difficult. It's just running for 12 minutes. It's like it can't be too hard. And then you realize, you're actually running flat out. For 12 minutes.
For 12 minutes is difficult. We've actually moved now. They've progressed to what we do now is a 2K time trial.
Okay.
And it's not overly difficult. You have 9 minutes to do the 2Ks. It's 4. Mm-hmm. So that's quick if you're running long distance. But I think 2Ks you can really push yourself, and you should be able to get there. But like I said, if you run a 7-minute 30, you expect it to beat your score. Or the next time you do 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So then it gets a little bit desperate and quite hard.
I can imagine. Okay, so I want us to talk about pursuing excellence, which is something which you obviously do as a professional, sports person, and something which I've always known you to do, even before, you left high school. And I'm quite curious to get your take on this. And, firstly to start off with, and I think part of pursuing excellence comes with, dealing with pressure, particularly at the highest level. And in your profession, there is a lot of that. There is a lot of, pressure to perform at the highest level. And I'm quite curious how you deal with that. And if you do find it difficult, so how do you sort of cope with that?
Yeah, there's always pressure, I think, in everything you do. Internally is probably the biggest pressure you're always going to face. There's obviously game situation, future selection. There's so many different avenues of it. Yeah, with regards to being selected for your own team, to want to play higher honors. Yeah, it is difficult, and like I said, you're always learning about it, and you're always learning about yourself. The more pressure you get into, you start to learn different things about yourself. The interesting thing, pressure is obviously it's always there, but it's always, for me, it's always what you make of it. Yeah, I'm sure I've obviously never been in a World Cup semi-final. There's massive pressure, but at the end of the day, it's a different kind of pressure. And at the end of the day, it always boils down to basics, I think, in cricket. At the end of the day, it's a guy running in with a ball and he's looking to knock you over, and it's all about how you think and cope in that moment. So over time, I've learned, when the pressure gets on, you have to do something. You really don't. It's more just about sticking to your basics, and from watching guys and learning about myself as well. The guys that perform really well under pressure have, done 10,000, 20,000 hours on their basics, and they always have something they can revert back to. And I think that's probably the key point in dealing with it. Is that you always have something to trust. If you don't have anything to trust in the moment in time, you got no chance. So it's more about calming yourself down. Yes, you acknowledge that it's there. You acknowledge that this needs to be done, but it's more about can you take the step away, look at it from another perspective, and not get rushed into the whole thing. A lot of players, I've done it. Many players have done it, and many players will continue to do it. Is that once you get caught up in it, your heart's going, you're thinking ahead, you're doing this, and you actually forget about the moment. And that's probably the biggest learning that I've had in cricket now. Is just more about living in the moment. It sounds so cliche because it really is, but it's something I struggle dealing with as well, is because I can get a bit too far ahead of myself. And you look at the bigger picture, you look at what you need to do, and you forget about the moment and the basics. And I think with dealing with it, it's more about staying in the moment, really being present at where you are right now, and having your basics to trust, along with your cricketing tactics, plans, and all those kind of things, which gets done outside of the pressure situation.
I think that's exceptionally profound, Ryan. And I think what stands out there to me is, you almost do have to sort of live in the moment. As it is a cliche saying, but it
is cliche. I remember reading Richie McCaw's book, and he said, I'm sure every running out for the All Blacks must be terrifying, but there's so much expectations, so much pressure on you. And his whole thing was, when he gets out there, he stamps his feet and he looks at the four corners.
Yeah.
And that pulls him into where he is. It's not about what happened yesterday or what happened at home or, last week. It's about, okay, I'm here now. It's a packed house at Eden Park. So whatever, I stamp my feet. I look at the four corners and, I'm at Eden Park playing against XYZ. Now it's time to, time to bring everything you have into that moment and really be there for that moment. And if you're half in, half out of it, you don't really have much of a chance, I think, personally. And gaining that insight from other sports codes. And it's interesting you chat to all the different guys. I was fortunate enough to chat to Christian Bezuidenhout, who's doing really well in the golf, and his coach. Yeah. And he just said, like, obviously different sport, but the mentality still is the same. And same thing, back to basics in the moment. What does it tell me? What I need to do? These are my basics. Pull yourself away and really live in, the contact, the striking of the ball, all the other golf specifics. But it's just so important of just really, really being where you are right now and not letting your mind wander.
Yeah, it's being present, right? It's actually sometimes what makes us nervous is the fact that we're not fully present. We're focusing on, the occasion. We're focusing on the consequence of bad performance. We're focusing on so many things. Where actually what you need to do is be present and be clear about, what it is that you're actually going to do. And the book you referenced, Richie McCaw, it's it's a fantastic book. So I recommend
Mm.
that to anybody who hasn't read it yet. I think it's called The Great Macaw, right? I think it's called The Great Macaw.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it's a fantastic book to read. Just around the psychological aspect to dealing with pressure situations. So thank you for sharing that. And speaking of situations, tell me about a time, where you went through probably a bit of a dry spell. Every single sports person has this, where things are
Mm.
not going so well. Despite your efforts, despite your practice, and so on. Um, and I'd extend that to people as well. There are
Mm.
times where life, doesn't go the way we want it to go. And in sport, that's analogous to performance and going through a bit of a dry spell. And for yourself, I'm quite curious to know, and to get a bit of a window or insight into how you dealt with that, if you went through it.
I did. I actually went through one like 4 weeks ago, not even. When we got back from Pakistan, we went straight from that bubble into the Durban bubble for the domestic T20 competition. And it was, yeah, I felt like I was batting well, but I couldn't get a run. I was given out a couple times. I wasn't out. It just wasn't working. And like I said, it's easy to get into the whole. It's easy to let the wheel turn there and just keep being hard on yourself and trying harder. Probably the thing I liked most about that moment when when it's not working for you is not to try too hard. Actually,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you don't practice, but it doesn't. A lot of guys, I've done it as well. When you're out of nick or something's not going, you really overdo it and you really look for things that aren't there. And you try extra hard. You hit, if you hit 100 balls, you go and hit 400 balls, and you just do too much. So yeah, probably a thing I learned is just to be a bit more relaxed with the game from that perspective, and is not to try too hard. Yeah, obviously, like I say, you have to keep trusting with the work you're doing. You always revert back to your basics, because they've been successful before, they will be successful again. And it's all about how you control it, I think, in your head.
Yeah.
As a cricketer, as a batter specifically, you're going to fail more times than you aren't.
Yeah.
And I think you have to wrap your head around that. Obviously, no one likes failure, but and it's just from that perspective, if you accept that, you can't be too hard on yourself. And that's why, I mean, don't try too hard. Obviously, put your head down and you keep working, but don't take it to the next level. And you got to have faith that you are good enough, and things will work out. In my case, I had a horrible T20 tournament in Durban. I couldn't get a run. The next game outside of that bubble, almost got a double hundred kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's all about just trying to hold yourself together in the time of need or time of desperation, I guess, and have faith that just keep doing the same thing, that the wheel will turn, and it will at some stage.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the point that you made about not trying too hard. Often, we almost end up firstly trying too hard. Secondly, changing our routine.
Yeah.
There must be something I'm doing wrong. There must be you end up getting flustered really. Whereas actually, what you're referring to is just trusting the process, and that eventually,
Yeah.
your hard work will pay off, and not overdoing that hard work doesn't
Yeah.
always equal the results to come through.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing I learned with regards to that is just being relaxed with the game.
Yeah.
Everyone, like I said, everyone has the expectations. Everyone wants to be the best, and not everyone can be the best. But if you're relaxed with the game, I think it takes off that extra bit of weight, whether you're doing well or not, what people are saying or not. I think it just takes that extra bit off that. At the end of the day, it's cliche again. It is a game,
Yeah.
and everyone's striving to be the best in that game, but there's so many pressures from all over the shop. You don't need that extra bit of pressure from yourself, and you'll find that the pressure from yourself is the most difficult one to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you consistently letting yourself down or worried about letting yourself down, I think it will end up eating you alive. And
Yeah.
that's why I find that being more relaxed with it and not trying too hard in times of need is probably the best way, just to give yourself the mental edge or the mental relief over it.
Yeah, that's quite profound. That's incredibly profound. And speaking of, sort of the mental side of things, you you obviously have quite a lot of competition in your profession.
Mm.
And this is nothing new. You've always had it, from the beginning, whenever you started playing cricket. It's kind of like, when you're in school, you you maybe when you start out, some people start out in the A team and they just, stay in the A team their entire time.
Yeah,
I think Bismarck Duplessis came to speak, at school once, and I was shocked to hear that the man never lost a rugby game in high school. And it's like that's that's completely
yeah,
ludicrous. It's completely ludicrous, right?
it's
Um,
ridiculous.
it's completely ridiculous. But naturally, most people, not Bismarck Duplessis, but most people
Mm.
have competition in high school. Although he would have had internal competition, I guess, to for that jersey and that spot. But naturally, you would, get competition, within the team that you play in, across the teams. There's always another team that you can get selected for. For
Yeah,
example, if you're in, high school, you have competition for your high school team, and then you have competition for your provincial team, then you have competition for the national team. Quite
mm.
curious to know, how do you handle it, the competition that you do face, and is it any different to now, at the level that you're at now versus, when you were younger?
It has changed quite a lot. I think in school I was fortunate enough because I did so much work with my father growing up that
Mm,
I was actually a little bit ahead. So my competition there was always internal. It's always, I want to get 100 today, tomorrow, the next
yeah,
day, kind of thing. So I never really had that worry. I think of selection and all those kind of things. And like I said, it was all internal, and I knew that I could do well at that level, and that
yeah,
would look after all the other things down the road. It did change when I got to the Lions, because now you're in a bigger pool. There are better
right.
players. There's older players. There's guys that have been there for years, doing well, kind of thing. And now you're forced to learn quickly. So
Mm,
you do. I fell into a trap as well, where you start looking at your competition. Okay, well, what's he doing? Should he? Okay, he got X amount of runs. I need to get more.
mm,
And it's and I think most people fall into that trap at some point in their career. But like I said, you got to get out of that trap, because you can't keep worrying about it.
yeah,
At the end of the day, and then eventually, for me personally, now it gets to the point where you you get the opportunity, okay, and eventually you become adequate with yourself. You know that, okay, well, I have the game to do X, Y, Z.
mm,
Um, I am good enough. You ask yourself those questions. You have to prove it to yourself at some point. But once you get to that point, everything seems to click, and then it's more about competition wise. Yes, even now for South Africa, you look, okay, well, what's this guy doing? He got 100 last week. I need this.
yeah,
But with cricket, there's so many things that are out of your control, and
yeah,
that's the thing which takes you the longest to realize, is that there's so many things that are out of your control, from selection to the board to the finance to the way practice works to the weather
yeah,
to every single thing. There's so many things that you cannot control. So then it becomes more internal, I think. And like I said, you just worry about yourself.
yeah,
What can you do to get better? What are the steps you're taking to get better? And I think once you accept that it's out of your control, um, you know you you've made peace with it, and it obviously means you continue to strive to work to whatever to play in that team, and just know that when you do get that opportunity, you're ready to jump at it and take it with both hands, because you're doing the work. Um, and it always boils down to the same thing: just trusting what you know, what can happen, and letting it unfold the way it's meant to, instead of trying to force it.
yeah. And I think that's quite an important, point that you shared there, around, the fact that it doesn't actually really help, looking at what
Mm,
others are doing and how they're going about it, because each and every single person has their own style, they have their own way of doing
yeah,
things. And sometimes, like you said, some things are out of your control. Someone, might have got a lucky break somewhere, or, might have got into a really good situation somewhere, and so on. So to compare it, wouldn't actually do you any justice or any benefit.
yeah. And at the end of the day, you just burn mental energy worrying about it. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's out of your control. What's the point in worrying about it? Yes, like I say, you all want to play, you all want to get selected, you all want to do well and all those kind of things. But it's, when the opportunity comes, if you, like I said, there's pressure, and if you're worrying about those extra things and you're bringing them upon yourself, you just, you're giving yourself less of a chance to do well and perform at whatever opportunity you're getting.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've learned, that there's no point in doing it to yourself. There's enough to worry about. You
Yeah.
don't need to add things that you can't control to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're quite right.
Mm.
You're quite right. I think that's an incredibly profound point. Ryan, in closing, I want to ask you to originally I thought I'd ask you to share advice to young cricketers, but I changing that now slightly, what advice would you give to young professionals in general, from what you've learned, so far in your career? Just in closing, what are 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give?
Put me on the spot with regards to that. Growing up, obviously, the quicker you learn, the best chance you have. In cricket, we're fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough, in the team that we have. Our average age is 30, so there's a wealth of experience around me. So I think from that perspective, it's always important to latch onto those kind of guys. Experience is everything.
Yeah.
Learn, ask them questions, sit with them, go out for dinner. We do a lot of traveling, so I've always myself going out for dinner with the guys who are older than me. Not because I don't want to hang out with the guys my age, but that gives me the best chance of actually learning something. So from that perspective, always be open just to asking them the hard questions. Don't, you have to feel vulnerable at some point, and being open to help. Not everyone can help you, and not every bit of advice you get is necessarily going to help you. And you can't take everything on board as well. So it's always, like I said, then it reverts back to maybe knowing yourself and sitting with what piece of advice you think will benefit you as well. So probably just, like I said, sit with the guys, learn as much as you can from the most experienced people in the room, the successful people in the room, and be open to being vulnerable, be open to help. You can't do it on your own. So be open to those kind of things, and whatever advice you get, make sure it matches into who you are as a person, no matter what industry you're in, and try and make it work to the best of your ability, and just keep your head down, keep going, in any industry, and just keep plugging away, do the same things, do the right things, and usually, hopefully, it will work out, as long as you keep investing in it.
Yeah, it's some brilliant advice. I think that's really some good advice. Even though you were on the spot, that was brilliant. So thank you for that. And I think anybody listening to this is probably quite grateful to have heard that, and to hopefully internalize that. Help them to change their world for the better. And Ryan, I just want to thank you so much for a chat that's absolutely flown by. I didn't even realize
it was going quickly.
Yeah, it just went so quickly. Time flies, I guess, when you're having fun. But thank you so much for coming on to Impactful Conversations. I want to thank you for the knowledge that you shared. I think it's been extremely insightful and encouraging, and inspirational as well. I think no matter what industry you're in, the points that you've shared are pertinent, I think, to winning at everything that you actually do. And I just want to thank you so much for availing that knowledge to us, sharing that with us, and I hope that those words will carry and reverberate to those who are listening to this and beyond. And I also hope that you've enjoyed being a part of the show, and I hope that you've enjoyed this experience as well.
I definitely have. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. And to you, the listener, I just want to say thank you once again for checking out the podcast. I would encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, whether it's on the YouTube channel, Apple Podcast, or Spotify Podcast, or Google Podcast. Subscribe to the channel so that you can find out when our next episodes come out. But I just want to thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope that you're all well, and I hope that you're all healthy. But from Ryan and myself, until we meet again, take care and bye-bye.